just such a pleasure. It's this constant kind of unfolding of knowledge. In the last 24 hours, I've listened to podcasts, I've watched a lecture online, I've read books. I'm not from start to finish. Nothing these days is from start to finish. But you're constantly grazing. Like trying to figure out, what's in there for me. And so for me, I just have this constant hunger to try to figure out, what do I need to learn about this? What do I need to learn about that? And partly it's practical, partly it's trying to figure out, how do I do stuff better? How do I make sense of my life and all of that? But partly it really just is for the sheer joy of learning. And I see it in my kids. I have a 14-year-old daughter who has a pile of books by her bed that, I'm not kidding you, literally touches the ceiling. And we call it, the Tower of Books. And some of them are books that are way beyond her at this point. Some of them books she hasn't read, but there's this ambition to it and a sense that there's miraculousness in these books, that there's something she wants to taste. And I see it with my son as well, who, is off at Harvard Summer School at the moment. He called after one of the lectures a couple of weeks ago, and he didn't even say hello. He just said, those were the 3 most intellectually thrilling hours of my life so far. And he'd just been in a class with this incredible professor talking about Homer's Odyssey, Joyce's Ulysses, and Dante's Divine Comedy, and the similarities between them. And there was something about just his sheer excitement at learning about this that I just thought, that's pretty fantastic. That, in this age where, we're constantly bombarded with stuff from TV and the internet and stuff like that, that you can still just get this sheer joy from books and the like. And so because I've always felt that joy myself, I think there was something really thrilling about seeing it in my kids. I think part of it really is so that you can figure out how to make sense of your own life. I mean, for me, I have this constant kind of quest that I think started as a sort of, mopey adolescent, where I kind of wanted to figure out, so what's it all about? How am I supposed to live? What, is the world just random? Does nothing make sense? And so one of the things that I was doing by reading was just trying to figure out, what have these guys figured out before me that I can learn from? And so you would read, Nietzsche or Hermann Hesse or something like that as a miserable, mopey teenager, and you'd think, oh, okay, so that's what the world is like. And then you'd read novels, and you'd be like, like you'd read J.D. Salinger, you'd read about Holden Caulfield, and you'd think, yes, there are other people who are miserable, mopey adolescents too. And so, I think in this process of learning, partly it's practical, it's figuring out how to live your life, more successfully so you can be more successful at work and the like, but partly it's just figuring out, how am I supposed to live? Can I be a decent, honorable person and do okay in the workplace, or do I have to be a snake and, cut people off at the knees and the like, things like that. And so when you're studying someone like Buffett or Munger, you're filing away this information in your head, and you're saying, okay, so there's a different way of doing capitalism that does work. Or you're looking at Guy Spear, in this whole idea of compounding of goodwill, and you're like, yeah, so that works as well. So for me, there's this lifelong process of learning from studying sort of the best ideas that people have had, whether it's in novels, in nonfiction books, in TED lectures, or meeting friends who I think are really smart and really wise. But I think once you stop doing that, you're kind of dead. And Irving Kahn, who, as I mentioned before, lived to 109, I said to his son and grandson, why do you think he lived so long? And they said, well, part of it obviously was genes, because he smoked and he ate red meat for decades, and it was all he ate basically was steak and burgers. But they said partly it was because he just had this incredibly inquisitive mind. And so even well after he turned 100, he was studying new technology, trying to figure out how the world was changing. And that kept him young. And so I think, this concept of lifelong learning, it's absolutely central to just being alive and feeling that you're kind of starting to understand a bit more of the mystery of life and what other people have figured out about life. I'm increasingly fascinated by this idea, your consciousness is everything, that how you think dictates everything that happens around you. And this is something that grew out of interviewing Arnold Vandenberg, in part because he's obsessed with the idea of the subconscious. And he said, really, what you think is what you are, which is an idea that Buddha had as well, right? And I think it runs through a lot of these spiritual paths. And I think it's a really important idea to explore because, for example, if you get very entangled in fear and doubt and anger and hatred and recrimination and a desire for vengeance and to prove yourself to these people who didn't realize how wonderful you were and stuff like that, you kind of become imprisoned in by those emotions. And so the inverse of that is that if you become, kinder, more forgiving, less judgmental, all of these things, despite the fact that we're all, profoundly flawed and working on ourselves, your life kind of becomes happier. And so I think all of us are at some level, we have this kind of war going on inside our heads where it's not really about the external stuff that happens to you. It's about kind of trying to gain more control over your own emotions, your own thoughts. And so part of what I'm studying at the moment is figuring out, so is Arnold Vandenberg right that you can actually take greater control over your mind and your thoughts? And if you do that, will you become happier? Will you become more successful? What will the impact be on the people around you? And so, here I am in my mid-40s, kind of with this whole new intellectual adventure where I'm trying to figure out, that would be kind of cool if he's right. And so that's part of the pleasure of lifelong learning, right? Is that you're just exploring new stuff and always getting reinvigorated by these new ideas that you're borrowing from other people.